Non-woke political protest forks like XLibre and Redot are thriving, are absolutely thriving. Non-DEI focused Linux distributions like Open Mandriva they're thriving as well. But the woke projects, they're not doing so good right now. In fact, some of them are doing downright terrible as they slowly slide into oblivion. I'm noticing a trend, and it brings my heart joy. I hate to jinx it, but I dare say that the age of non-woke open source is beginning. Follow me through on all this. I just published an article earlier today. I want to read it to you now, and I've got a whole lot of other thoughts around this. A whole lot of thoughts. So here we go. Over the last year, we've seen a couple of high-profile forks of large open source projects, which were inspired in part by a desire to move away from the political discrimination and the leftist extremism in politics within their original projects. Now, I make sure I say in part, because all of these projects had technical motivations and organizational motivations, but the desire to move away from the woke politics and the discriminatory DEI stuff in other projects was clearly at least some factor. Case in point, back at the beginning of June, not even 2 months ago, the Xorg project was forked into XLibre, the new open source X11 server. And last year, not even, like a little over half a year ago, the Godot game engine was forked, creating the Redot game engine. Now, at the time when each of these forked projects were started, many predicted that they would go nowhere, right? That they were nothing more than political protest forks. That's a phrase that I heard several times, often on Mastodon and the mailing lists for the original open source projects. And they all predicted, almost unanimously, that these new forks, these political protest forks, would die quickly. That was the prediction. Now let's check in on both of those projects, because let's be honest, of all of the protest forks, I almost hate to call them that because they're not protest forks, but that's what they were labeled. But of all the protest forks, these two were the most high profile. And the mantra of they will fail because there's no substance there, they won't make it, they're just political protests, that was over and over again. It was repeated constantly. So let's look in on them. XLibre, so the Xorg fork. Since officially launching at the end of June last month, the XLibre project has published a handful of official releases. They are now up to version 25.0.0.5 with a significant number of changes and fixes. I'm just going to read a little bit from their achievements blurb that is on their GitHub README. Since the fork on June 5th, 2025, our by now more than 30 contributors have released numerous code cleanups and the X namespace extension for separating clients into namespaces, integrated tear-free by default, and allowed enabling atomic mode setting. XNest was ported to XCB per ABI driver directories were introduced, and the XQuartz has been added to our build jobs, meaning support for Mac OS. We have fought through all the issues that have been thrown at us, reached the first stage of the associated workflow, and established our support for packaging XLibre by volunteers. We've also made a first release announcement and created blah, blah, blah. So, amazing, right? So this is less than 2 months in. Considering the significant new features, like the X namespace extension, which is all about making things more secure, the first release of XLibre, that 25.0 release, was larger in every single way I can think to measure. Total number of commits, number of new features, number of bugs fixed, than any Xorg release that has occurred in the last decade, right? And the number of contributors is actually growing. But now one of the other critiques, one of the other predictions that the woke projects and their supporters said of XLibre was that no Linux distribution on planet Earth would possibly include XLibre. It just isn't going to happen. No one's ever going to use this, so it's pointless, right? They predicted that operating system support would go nowhere with XLibre. No one would use it. Well, you can see where this is going. According to the Are We XLibre Yet wiki, a number of systems have already officially adopted XLibre, including Devuan, which is a non-systemd fork of Debian, Artix, GhostBSD, and my personal favorite, Open Mandriva. There's a couple of Stormix is in there, Vipnix, Illumarine, GhostBSD is on there, which is great, and they're all very supportive of the project, and they're either working on first-party support right now. In fact, many of them have it ready to go right now. I am currently running right now Open Mandriva with XLibre using XFCE right now, and it's an absolutely fantastic experience. And this is really important to note. All of that support has occurred even though XLibre has only existed for 1 full month. They forked at the beginning of June. First release was the end of June, roughly 1 month ago today, give or take a day or two. That means that several Linux distributions are already officially supporting it, and that is nothing short of crazy impressive. This is, I hate to use the words like unprecedented, but this is. We're not talking about a month into a new point update to something, the Linux distribution repositories will pick up the update. Because oftentimes Linux distributions will lag a month, 3 months, 6 months before they pick up point updates into their regular repositories. That's a common occurrence. Now we're talking about a complete fork of the project with huge numbers of new features. I mean, huge numbers. And they're already including it officially in the Linux distributions. That's huge. That's crazy. Significantly faster adoption of XLibre over Xorg than we saw for Wayland. Worth noting that. In addition, a number of systems have third-party repositories which allow users to install and use XLibre, including Arch and FreeBSD, and Gentoo and macOS and NixOS and Slackware, and there's more on the way. And again, macOS. So you can run the darn thing on macOS. In short, growing group of developers, right? So it's not just one guy, right? It's a whole crew. It's dozens of developers. Rapidly growing platform support. Rapidly. Unprecedentedly rapidly. New releases which put the original project Xorg to shame. Holy heavens. Now let's move on to the Redot project, right? So the Redot project, which forked off of Godot back in October of 2024, had a stable release. Actually had a few stable releases, but had a stable release of 4.3.1 back in June, and just had a new test release, the 4.4 alpha, just like a couple days ago. Both with both new features and bug fixes. Lots of new features consistently have been rolling out for Redot, lots of new bug fixes. In fact, Redot has had 13 releases since the project started late last year in October, right? With an absolutely massive number of commits since then. We're looking at over 5,000 commits, over 5,000 files changed, with 68 core contributors. In short, steady new releases, new features and bug fixes, and both stable and testing releases. Now, it is hard to look at either of these projects and come to any conclusion other than they are absolutely thriving. At this point, it's looking like those who predicted rapid failure for these political forks were not only wrong, but wildly, obscenely wrong. And there is a lesson in here. And this isn't just one or two projects to look at. A lot of you may remember back in January, On January 6th, Open Mandriva had contacted me because I had been lamenting the lack of non-woke software. And what do I mean by that? Woke software for me is discriminatory software, is software that says, oh, you're conservative, you can't be here. Oh, you don't feel like being political. Well, you're getting kicked out, because that's what Godot did. They kicked out people for just simply not wanting to be political. The OpenSUSE Linux project banned, I swear to heavens, like half of their membership base because they had a test where if you would wave the trans flag, you could stay, and if you refused, they kicked you out, myself included, and I used to be a board member there. On and on and on. NixOS and conducted what they called a purge of undesirable people, basically anyone who was conservative-leaning in their politics. It was all over the map, right? Extraordinarily discriminatory, DEI, woke politics infused open source software projects, organizations, and companies. It just seemed like we were flooded with them. And so I was lamenting, where are the non-woke projects? So I got this email. I got an email from the guy who like the top dog, the big kahuna over at Open Mandriva. And he's like, hey, Lunduke, let me tell you something. Not only are we not woke, we're basically anti-woke. We are just not at all discriminatory. We think the woke DEI stuff is ridiculous. He sent me a whole bunch of stuff about it, and he's like, yeah, we'll take a clear stance on this. And so I came out on January 6th, and I did a video and an article about it. I was like, Open Mandriva is a non-woke Linux distribution. And what happened next was spectacular. The usage of Open Mandriva soared. I mean, it went through the roof. If you look at like the Google search trends, that very next day, it basically baselined all the Google search trends and took everything before that, set it to 0, and then boom, it's now at 100. Like it just went like a straight vertical cliff face, straight up. The people started flooding the Open Mandriva forum. And there literally is a forum post in the Open Mandriva forum that is their most commented on, most visited post that they thread in their forum that they've ever had. And they've been around for years. And it's literally Lunduke sent me sort of thing. And the thing is, it wasn't about me, right? Because this wasn't about how I'm some hugely popular dude. That's not what this was. Because what it really was is there was a pent-up demand. There were so many people who were chomping at the bit to find an operating system, a Linux distribution that they could get behind morally, where they could say, we want something that's not going to be discriminatory, that accepts people from all walks of life, from all political orientations, including those dirty conservatives, right? Everyone was welcome within Open Mandriva. They were non-woke that way. And so it just soared. And it's continued to go up and impress me since then. I've been using Open Mandriva as my primary system since then. It's been wild. And like I was mentioning, several other Linux distributions have been cratering, or at least slowly dying, as they have become more woke, more DEI focused, more woke politics, more exclusionary, more all that yucky stuff, right? The leftist extremist politics, right? The elementary OS, the more extreme politically that operating system has gotten, the less people seem to use it. OpenSUSE just outright banned half the membership. It got so bad with OpenSUSE after they spent 2 years banning anyone who even smelled vaguely conservative-y that they struggled to find anyone willing to sit on their board of directors at all. They hold elections. they have like, an every 2 year sort of election cycle. And their election cycle came up and they're like, all right, we have 3 seats open for the elections this year. Who wants to run? Crickets. Anybody? Bueller? Nobody. Not one person among all of the OpenSUSE contributors and members was willing to run because there just weren't that many left. They kicked out everyone who did stuff. And they started extending the deadline for nominating people. They extended it once. They extended it twice. And then they kind of had to basically beg people to run. And eventually they got people to run, and people were running essentially unopposed. I mean, it was it was ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous. I think they had 3 open seats, and they eventually did get 4 people to run, so only one person didn't get to get on the seat. And when you look at their voting numbers, I mean, they had dozens of people voting. And this is what happens. We see the similar things happening with NixOS. NixOS, there was a point, over the last couple of years where it was really making a name for itself. It was really starting to thrive. And then they just started shooting themselves in the foot by conducting their purges of conservatives who they called Nazis because they're nice, lovely people like that. And the result is things have really kind of tapered off. Right? It's not surging like it was. It was skyrocketing for a while there. And now it's tapered off. It dipped down a little bit. It's just not doing as well as it was. The releases aren't as interesting or exciting. The quality has slagged off a little bit, and it's just not soaring anymore. That's what's happening to the woke software. The woke projects are having a really hard time. And it's happening across all of open source. But that is not the case for the non-woke stuff. The small handful of non-woke projects are soaring, are thriving. In some cases, far beyond even the most optimistic expectations. It's pretty amazing. Now, there's a long way to go here. Most open source projects out there are very, very woke. But as people see how utterly and fantastically successful you can be by making just non-political software, i.e. non-woke software, I think we're going to see more of it. I think right now what we are seeing is the very beginning, that very starting line of the age of non-woke open source. This is the point at which, if things can continue, the future could look pretty bright, right? If over the next year or two, we see a few more non-woke big open source projects get forked or started, things could be looking pretty good. Things could be looking pretty good. What if we had a similar thing happen with GNOME? What if someone came along, a GNOME developer, put on their big boy pants and said, you know what? We could fork this and make a non-woke GNOME, fix things up, because there's some technical things that could use to be fixed as well, and make a non-political, non-discriminatory, non-woke, non-DEI GNOME. What could happen? I don't know. I'm just saying, as one example. There's a lot of examples we could point to out there, but a handful more coming along like that, we could be in really good shape. There's reason to be optimistic. Now, I know we've been burned a million times. I know we've dealt with a lot of really horrible discrimination and awful politics within the world of open source software. And I don't think any of that's going away. I think we're going to experience a whole lot more of it. In fact, I would bet as we witness the non-woke projects and non-woke forks be truly successful, I think that is going to drive the woke projects crazy. Because we've already seen over the last year or two how many of the more woke open source projects have gone more extreme. And I predict that they'll go even more extreme, more discriminatory. I think they'll conduct more bannings. They'll get crazy. And I think that ultimately that could lead to more non-woke forks and a blossoming of a non-political, non-discriminatory world, an ecosystem of open source software. And I think that could be truly fascinating. Maybe I'm overly optimistic, but doggone it, with how much negative stuff that I have to slog through all the time, I've earned being optimistic occasionally. Thank you to all of the Lunduke Journal subscribers who have allowed me to do this sort of coverage over the last several years. I could not do this without you. You truly make the Lunduke Journal possible. The last bastion of truly independent, big tech-free, ad-free, and non-woke tech journalism on planet Earth. All because of you. Go to lunduke.com and click on some things. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across the inner tubes, I do declare, end broadcast.